Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and with me tonight is Joshua Vincent, who's the Executive Director of the Center for the Study of Economics in Philadelphia. So thank you, Josh, for coming up to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia to New London to be on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Well, thanks. I know that you're very familiar with New London, but maybe you can start out by talking a little bit about the Center for the Study of Economics and what kind of economics you do there.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I'm really happy to be back in New London. I actually lived here in the late 80s and early 90s and loved the town. In fact, I drove past my old apartment on Vauxhall Street.
Oh, wow.
There you go. I'm an old aunt. But I've been the head of the Center for the Study of Economics since 1997, and it's a nonprofit foundation. It's supported by grants, donors, bequests, and contract work with municipalities. And what we do is we investigate tax systems in cities. And what we particularly investigate is what we're going to talk about tonight,
Right.
which is the land value tax. And in New London, there's been great interest over the past several years.
There has since about 2007 or 8, really.
Right.
And taxes are, as usual, a very hot topic in New London because, like so
Yeah.
many municipalities, more than half of the land is non-taxable. And so property taxes are very high, and they are onerous to a lot of the people who live here. And that's sort of a constant that we live with.
Oh, of course.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about what land value tax means.
Sure, just to put it kind of simply, if, for example, if I were to talk to a homeowner like you, and I said, do you like the property tax? You'd go, no way, nobody likes the property tax. That's because it's two taxes in one. One, it's a tax on buildings, and any homeowner knows that if you fix up your house, if you keep it nice, or if you totally rehab and rebuild a house, your taxes go up.
Yeah, so right on top of the first investment to make the improvement, you're hit with the higher taxes.
Absolutely, and the building value is always so much higher than the lot value, that's what you're really getting punished on. And somebody did some research in Pittsburgh a few years ago and figured out that over the course of 10 years, the property tax on a house is equal to the tax on cigarettes or alcohol. So they're treating building houses and offices and so on as a sin tax. So what we're trying to do is flip the script so that you don't punish people who keep their properties up, build properties, maintain them. And instead, what we want to do is reward them by untaxing buildings. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And this, a lot of people talk about giving people abatements or forgiving taxes if they make improvements. How does establishing a land value tax system differ from that?
It's a lot more robust and it's a lot more fair. Now, New London made national news, of course, over its exciting adventures with Pfizer, and they abated Pfizer's property for 10 years, and the abatement was given just to them, just to a preferred, if you will, client. The land value tax is a universal abatement on every building in the city. Anybody that uses a roof and 4 walls would enjoy the benefit of a permanent tax abatement on the building. That's the whole idea behind it. It never ends, and everybody gets it, every citizen, every business, not just a chosen few.
So I know you have a slide about New London. So, you know, we've been hearing a lot now. You walk down Bank Street or State Street in New London, and there are a lot of empty storefronts.
Yeah.
The condition of the buildings ranges widely. There are some that are pristine and have been kept up and improved and are gorgeous. And then there are some that are not fit for occupancy. And then there are some just empty lots.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the downtown and what's been happening in the past and what could make a difference.
Okay, I brought along a slide actually, and let me see if I...
Okay, it's on there.
Oh, it's on? Okay, there we go. So some of you will recognize that. That's a vacant lot on Bank Street. And some of the other slides that I brought tonight are other Connecticut cities that are interested in this and are coming up with a strategy. But just to explain what we're talking about, now this is a little out of date because it's before the mill rate was raised. This is what I did last year to illustrate land tax for some planners. But that's a vacant lot and it just sits there. And our thesis is that it sits there because the current tax rate, it's a little higher now maybe, but you only pay $1,100 a year for that vacant lot, which is a valuable zoned commercial lot. It's supposed to be built on. The city wants it to be built on. The city, through your tax dollars,
Right.
provides the services.
So it does have it could have the hookup to water, to electricity, it's close to the transportation hub, and none of that's being utilized.
It's not being utilized, and think of the other services. I mean, when it snows, does the snow plow lift up when it goes past a vacant lot? No. All city services create land value and make the vacant lot valuable, not the owner. So what we want to do, if we go back, is if we had a land value tax, you can see right there, then the tax would go up to about $3,000 a year.
Which really isn't the kind of rise that would give an owner a heart attack or anything. It's significant, but...
A lot of these owners own more than one property, so it adds up. So eventually what you hope is that the landowner's accountant says to him one day, look, get this off your bottom line, sell it. But he could also do something good for the community, the property owner. And what he would do, and this is our little arithmetic lesson, and it's going to be short, I promise. If we had a land value tax, because there's no tax on buildings, he would still pay $3,000 a year. But if he put up a $300,000 building, the taxes would skyrocket, as you can see. And that skyrocketing property tax is the disincentive that you talked about. People do the right thing for the neighborhood and for themselves, and they pay for it. So if you were to replace that lot with a building like the one next door, you'd be paying a lot of money, and over the course of 10 years...
your taxes would triple or quadruple in very short order.
Absolutely, and you have to keep it fixed up, so there's the expense, and every time you fix it up, you pay more in taxes. So that essentially is sort of the lesson of a land value tax, that you can see the rise in holding cost of that land. Just the expense of paying year in, year out a significant amount of money. It incentivizes the landowner to build or sell, but the benefit, the incentive of this taxation is that you are decreasing, decreasing the tax, the builder can ask for a higher price, make a better profit. He can use better materials. She can do a creative, green, LEED certified building at very little future cost. And so the benefit of an abatement, I think we all agree abatements work,
Right.
but they shouldn't work for just a few people. They should work for everybody.
And they shouldn't necessarily work for 5 years or 10 years and then come to an end, because what we saw with Pfizer and what we see with some other projects where there are abatements, the property owner holds onto the property for 9.5 years, and then they clear out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, they still get the sticker shock, it's just a little bit down the road.
But they could actually pay for their taxes by also helping themselves by putting up a building. That's what we want to encourage. I mean, in New York City or Philadelphia, which is where we're based, there are valuable vacant lots worth millions of dollars that have been sitting for 40 years, 50 years. And New London has got some of that going too, as do Hartford,
Right.
Bridgeport, New Haven, I could go on.
And Now, let's talk a little bit about density and how important density is to downtowns, because a lot of people think, oh, density, you're going to make the downtown so crowded, it won't be livable. So maybe talk a little bit about density and what it means for a city.
From the green perspective and also from the reviving cities perspective, density in an area that you want density, that's a good thing. The infrastructure in downtown New London is built to support buildings that go up. They put buildings that went up in the
not 90-story
1890s.
buildings, like in New York City, but 6, 8, 10-story buildings.
The traditional downtown that everybody loves. Whenever people say, what kind of town do you want to live in? They want that. And the problem in New London, when I lived there, when I lived here and currently, is that the downtown is barely hanging on. I used to go to Parade News all the time, and or Malobs, and so they're barely holding on or gone. And so what we want to do again is help people fix those buildings up without the tax penalty, and that's really the basic message behind it. Density brings business, density brings safety, public safety, more eyes on the street. Density brings restaurants, it brings festivals. Instead of having folks drive off the ferry and drive away, they'll say, hey, look at this, let's stop, let's see what all the fun's about. And that density is sometimes gets a bad name. But, Monaco is the most densely populated place on earth, and people seem to like it.
Well, I've been to places like Victoria in Vancouver Island.
Oh, okay.
And, people keep saying about New London, it's only 5.5 square miles, and that isn't much land. But actually, we have a lot of wasted land. We have a population of about 28,000 on 5.5 square miles. And Victoria, on about 8 square miles, has a population of 85,000. It's much more dense than New London, but it actually seems more spacious in many ways because it has big parks that have high-rise condos surrounding those parks. And, even going to New York City, you see that people, above every business, you have hundreds of people residing.
Yes.
It's a lot. I'm sure businesses come and go in the city as well, but they probably don't have to struggle to the extent that businesses in downtown New London struggle.
You need people to go to your stores and to use your services, the barber shop or what have you. And the problem that most of our cities were hit with in the early 60s to the 1980s was people left. And when people leave, business can't chase them out if they want to stay in New London. I mean, we had the pedestrian mall for a while.
Right.
The crazy
That's
ideas.
the New London area I moved to. I'm glad to see it gone.
Yeah, and that actually helped drive pedestrians away. I mean, right now I live in a town about the size of New London. It's called Collingswood, New Jersey. And they make sure that there are policies in place that it's a walkable street from 6 a.m. to about 12 midnight, each night, every night. Restaurants, places for kids to go. It's very safe. And any town can do it. New London is such a jewel. And some would say a jewel in the rough, but I think it's a jewel, and it's got so much potential.
Well, and you talk about the density too. People think, if you get out into the country, it's peaceful, it feels pastoral. But if you're walking in the city and it's deserted, you do not get that relaxed feeling.
Oh, of course.
You feel threatened if you're on a downtown city street and there's no one there.
Yeah.
And it's dark. You really feel much safer if there are people on the street. So, there's a difference between cities and what our vision of, what might be desirable in the country or even in an outer suburb would be.
I agree with you. In fact, we did a little work with the town of Simsbury. And Simsbury is kind of interesting. It's the central part of Connecticut. and it's very bucolic and pastoral, or it was until about 20, 30 years ago. I think it's denser and more congested than most downtowns in Connecticut, except everyone's in a car.
Right.
But there's no pedestrians. It's just a big scrum of cars going back and forth. And they want to actually create out of whole cloth a downtown. Well, we already have one here in New London, up
We do.
up in Norwich, you know, you name it.
Actually, right now, Waterford is talking about trying to create a downtown because Waterford is pretty affluent.
Yes.
But there is no center of town. And they're thinking about investing quite a lot of money into creating a downtown in Jordan Village, which is the oldest part of the town. So we already have that.
You have it right here. And if we change tax policy, we can then permit people to do what they want, which is spend money to make money by putting up buildings and enjoying their lives and having good lives.
Now, I'm going to be a devil's advocate here because
Uh-oh.
I was, I went to quite a few of the local hearings several years ago.
Right.
And one accusation that I heard was, this is social engineering. Is it social engineering?
It's not social engineering. In fact, it's almost quite the opposite. It's kind of funny because sometimes I get called a communist, and sometimes I get called a fascist or a libertarian.
Well, the libertarians in general do like land value tax. I think Milton Friedman was a big advocate of it, and there are libertarian
Yes.
economists who favor it.
Ironically, we've had occasion to match up William Buckley, the arch-conservative, and Michael Kinsley, the arch-liberal columnist. And essentially they said, we agree on nothing, but we do agree that the ideas of land value taxation that descend from our greatest classical economists, Adam Smith, Thomas Paine, Henry George, are the way to get prosperity for everybody, but at the same time, you do it by getting out of people's way. And so that's sort of the libertarian free
Right.
market approach.
But it's still a land value. Now, it was some of although I'm a green, obviously, so I'm maybe coming at it more from the liberal side.
Sure.
It was partly reading the libertarian defenses of land value tax that convinced me that it was a really good way to go about things.
Yeah.
Because I thought, wow, if we agree, if the environmentalists agree with the libertarians that this tax is fair, that it makes sense not to tax people on the basis of their labor or what they've constructed or what they're contributing, but on that piece of the commons, that they have the resources from, that kind of started to make sense to me.
It really is where we come together. All of us can come together because you've got this urban commons, and that's evidenced by land values. If you put up the Pfizer factory, say, in Death Valley, that would have been a dumb decision.
Right.
Nobody wants to be there. Land values come first because people's preferences come first. They want to be here, or they can get bribed like Pfizer to come in. The idea of a land value tax is that the values are created by the community, so let them go back to the community in the form of taxation and leave everybody else alone, as you say, to do what they
Right.
will.
And it seems to me that it takes advantage more of like the unique features of each community. I mean, we've got a transportation hub here. We have access to a deep water port, which is underutilized because when Pfizer came, one of the controversies was it was not a water-dependent use.
Right.
An enterprise that really needs that deep water access, it would have been willing to pay more because we had a resource that they needed, not just a resource that gave them a good view, but
Yes.
wasn't really needed for their operations. So, electric boat that's building submarines, probably they're pretty happy paying property tax because that's what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps the community, the sub-base. It helps Groton. Groton helps the sub-base, and they work together, and they make it work. In New London, the deep water port, there's plenty of subsidies available for people to invest in Connecticut deep water ports. But the subsidies end. Again, we're going back to that. And that's why people go, no, maybe I'll move to New Jersey or something like that. And so that's what we're, again, trying to do, is let markets work, but free markets, not fixed or subsidized markets.
So, and that's one of the reasons the libertarians love it, of course, because it is a real free market attitude.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, the founders of New London in the early 1700s to, until the Revolution when it got burned down, they came and they paid a tax only on land. That was in the colonial America and post-independent America. That was the tax. You paid a tax on land and slaves. Well, slavery's gone, thank God. But those were the only sources of revenue for localities.
So this is really not a new idea.
Not at all. It's really not.
Yeah, it's been around for a long, long time. Now, one problem the cities have chronically, which contributes to, the high tax rate on most, private property owners, is that in most of our cities, we have about half the property that has nonprofits on it. And many of these nonprofits serve regions far beyond the boundaries of the cities.
Yeah.
Now, how does land value tax doesn't really directly address that? How does it help the situation, though? Yeah,
we can't address it because once you're off those tax rolls, you're off. So it doesn't matter if you have a land tax, a building tax, whatever, you're exempt. But it makes it incumbent upon a community like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which uses a land value tax. 60% of their land value is tax exempt, over half. And it's the most valuable land in town. It's the downtown, it's the hill, it's the river area. So it's incumbent upon a city with all that tax exempt land to get the best use as much as possible out of the land that is taxable. Now that doesn't mean putting up skyscrapers in Ocean Beach, because zoning doesn't permit that and the community doesn't want it.
Right.
So you have to respect what the community desires. And at the same time, though, I think everybody in Ocean Beach or elsewhere would love to come to a downtown rather than slog out to the malls or something like that.
Right,
so
and see...
It's a balance.
And see stores that are surviving
Yeah.
rather than empty storefronts when they come downtown.
Exactly. And the problem, of course, is that the suburban or the sprawl kind of development, it's so cheap. The buildings are cheap. Everything is ticky-tacky, to quote the old folk song. And New London, the issue that could be a benefit is that these buildings are beautiful. They're terrific. The central business district is pretty intact. I work with cities in Pennsylvania where they have no downtown left to speak of. It's gone. West Virginia, upstate New York, for example. You've got this repository of great buildings that will be expensive to rehab. So if they're expensive to rehab, then you've got to give a reward to somebody that does that.
And, in fact, it's funny you mention that because we were renters for 15 years in Waterford before we moved to New London. Because we weren't really sure we wanted to stay in Connecticut. And once we decided we wanted to stay, we looked at houses in Waterford and in New London both. And at a certain point, I think it took us a long time to figure this out after we had looked at 30 or 40 or 50 houses. Like every single house in New London was more attractive than every single house in Waterford because the New London houses had been built between 1870 and 1930, and the Waterford ones were all these like raised ranches from the 70s, and we just had to move to New London because that's where the houses that we really were attracted to were.
Aesthetically and also structurally, they're sound. A lot of the newer homes in the suburbs are they're ticky-tacky, as I said.
Yes.
You know, the joists in my old house in New Jersey, they're 2x18s. Nobody does that anymore.
Now, you said that there are quite a few towns around Connecticut that are interested in this, and there was some legislation last year in the state that addressed some land value tax issues. Can you tell us what the
Sure.
current status is?
Yeah, it's interesting. In last year, in January of 2013, the House Speaker established the Municipal and Regional Efficiencies Commission. And they were going to just take a look at everything that was troubling cities and making cities in Connecticut less competitive with their suburban areas. And they tackled the car tax, or tried to tackle the
Right.
car tax. That didn't go for. Putting services together, that kind of thing, doing efficiencies of scale. And we were invited to come up and speak on the subject of land value tax. And the committee spoke to myself and several members of the Hartford delegation. And the chairman was Jeff Berger of Waterbury, and his city needs their downtown revived. And he asked a lot of questions about land value tax and said, you know, why haven't we done this before? Mayor Finizio sent a representative to speak in favor of the subject, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And so what eventually happened was a law was passed and signed by Governor Malloy called Public Act 13-247. I don't know that stuff. But it establishes a pilot program for up to 3 cities in Connecticut to try a land value tax in any way that they would desire. Citywide, a central business district, a neighborhood, or a certain part of town. And they come up with a plan, and it gets implemented, and the Office of Planning and Management is overseeing that program.
Now, have cities already signed up for that?
A bunch of cities are filling out the forms. It's very, as we mentioned before the show, Connecticut has control over what cities do. And it's a very,
Right.
it's kind of a difficult application to fill out.
Yes, so, well, we have a phone call.
Ah,
Hi, thanks for calling in.
Hello.
Hi.
I want to speak with Joshua. Are you familiar with the Mohegan downtown, the hotel?
yes,
Mohegan.
sure.
I was wondering, what positives do you feel the Mohegan offers in its current status as a building that's mostly public assistance housing? And how does that factor in? Being, if you know, New London is a gem, and that would be the crown jewel building. It always has been from long back. You know, it's been a beautiful hotel with a revolving restaurant at the top, and now this mecca of opulence from the past is now public housing. How does that fit into a positive spin for the city?
Yeah,
Thanks for calling, and I'll hand it to you, Joe.
Well, that's a terrific question, and I'm an old movie buff, and I know that Constance Bennett and Betty Davis stayed there back in the day, as they say, and it is a gem. But to fix it up and to make it worthwhile for any building owner, there's going to be lots and lots of help needed, including tax policy. Now, we know that under a land value tax, the building as it is would see its taxes drop like a rock, and that's a good thing. Now, is public housing on your main retail drag a good idea? Probably not, but that was all that building could
So at that point,
be used
yeah,
at the time.
I mean, we have other buildings, this gets me thinking, like about 10 years ago, the Crocker House was, there was a plan to turn that into a rent, not public housing exactly, but a rent control housing. And it was rejected for that reason. It didn't seem like a good idea. And the details didn't make a lot of sense too. They were asking too much rent to be really affordable for people of the incomes they were looking at. And so it didn't seem like a great idea, and it was rejected by the city council. So I wonder, just thinking about the Mohegan, if the other big buildings in downtown New London, like the Crocker House, like the Bacon Building, which Bill Cornish fixed up into apartments. I mean, there are other buildings like the Cronin Building,
Yes.
which are condemned, but could be a terrific apartment building if someone was motivated properly to fix it up.
And if you could provide a market. See,
Right.
that's the thing. If your tax policy is driving away somebody that wants to fix up a building, God bless Mr. Cornish, because he took on, for doing the right thing, his tax bill goes through the roof. And on the flip side, the condemned building, when the roof finally collapses, that owner will get to go to the assessor and say, look, I let the roof collapse. And the assessor will be forced to lower the tax bill because of the building falling apart. So the Mohegan is a great example of maybe that's not the best use anymore. If you want to bring in people with money, with cash, to live amongst people that might not have
Right.
as much money, in other words, have a full community,
Right.
it would be a good idea. For example, there are so many houses owned by absentees, single-family homes, or homes that have been split into a few apartments, is to encourage areas where you could have assistance and services to help a vulnerable population.
Right.
And they might not be in the Mohegan in the future, but they would be in a decent place elsewhere and help make the community, New London, sort of everybody, the full spectrum of people.
And in downtowns and cities, I think when we're talking about low-income people, and I'm not as concerned with the Mohegan is the huge housing projects on the other side of where the former Radisson Hotel, now Holiday Inn.
Right.
That's acres and acres that used to be a street grid and now is pretty unattractive public housing. And I get more concerned about that being right on the edge of downtown. It would be great, but a huge project to rebuild that street grid and have mixed use buildings there. What I keep thinking with lower income people is if you can bring a bigger mix of people to live downtown, then the perception isn't it's all poor. It's just a mix.
Absolutely. The housing that you're talking about was built a long time ago when the ideas that were coming out of government were deleterious to the town.
Yeah.
It's fenced off, literally fenced off.
Yeah.
It's all low-rise, sort of stamp a unit out.
Yeah, it's actually not very dense if you look at the number of units. Even, the so-called high-rise on Crystal Avenue in New London, before that I think it only has about 120 units in it.
Yeah.
When it was a neighborhood, there were probably more than 120 living units on those blocks that made up that neighborhood. So my guess is they reduced the density when they made the public housing.
Yeah, the legacy of urban renewal is something that cities, including New London, have to really recover from. But you're right, bringing in a mix is what counts. And once you bring in a mix of people that have disposable income and some with not so much disposable income, you'll see that with human nature being what it is, they'll get along and they'll complement each other. Maybe it's Pollyanna, but so be it.
Yeah. Now you have some slides, some pictures, photos from some other spots in Connecticut, and I thought maybe it would be interesting to look at and see what else is happening.
I just want to show essentially what's going on
Sure.
and what kind of research we're doing, and it's relevant to New London as well. So if we can go to the computer again, I'm going to move us over to We did some work in Norwalk, and their concern is smart growth. And smart growth means, as you know, and as many people do, that you're trying to save the urban fabric of the city, and you're also trying to save the clean and green countryside at the same time. If you save the city, you save the country. So there is the traditional downtown business district of Norwalk. And there is Connecticut Avenue, which is Route 1. So that's the sprawl development. What do you see? You see parking. That's it. And it used to be farms, all farms and ice cream stands. We talked to the mayor of Norwalk, and he said, out there when I was a kid, there was nothing. And so there has been tons of government investment in Norwalk. And what does that downtown Main Street look like? It looks like New London's downtown. It really does. Where's Parade News? Now, they put in a lot of money, grants from the state and so on, to put up Victorian street lamps and brick sidewalks, and it's very nice, but it's so expensive to be in Norwalk as opposed to outside Norwalk. If you look carefully, almost all of those buildings are vacant. All of those
They're
businesses.
probably dealing with, like New London, a 35% mill rate, whereas the surrounding suburbs might be 15 to 20% mill rate.
Exactly. And this downtown of Norwalk is so similar to New London's, I thought it would be appropriate. And it's beautiful. They've done a lot of rehab, but it's empty, and that's the problem. So what we did is model land value tax for the city of Norwalk. And I'm going to do it fast, but out on Route 1, you see all that red and that orange. Those are the giant parking lot businesses, automobile-oriented businesses, and their taxes would go up.
And they're mostly just surface parking, right? We're not talking
Not at all.
multi-level.
Not at all. It's flat top. There's no such thing as free parking, as Donald Shoup says. And if you look then at Main Street on the right-hand side of the map, you see that their taxes plummet. Some of the buildings, their taxes are decreased by 91%. That's every year.
Wow.
They're going from $12,000 to about $1,200 a year. One of the retail with a couple of apartments. We did some research in the Upper Albany district of Hartford, which is severely troubled. And they've tried every strategy under the sun to save Hartford and especially Upper Albany. But one thing they really did was punished business and residents with the highest tax rate in the whole state. And it shows. Now
So people move out.
They move out, and there's no reason for them to come in. The only people that come in are the longtime homeowners, but it's people that are speculating and are absentee property owners. So they sit on those properties, take rent out, and this happens in New London too. They
does.
take rent out and they don't put anything in to the buildings.
In fact, in New London, we have some buildings where the property taxes are so low because the buildings are so blighted that it's worth it to the landlords just to use it, like instead of paying for warehouse storage, they have a house in New London where they stow all their junk.
It's a business model that works in a lot of our cities, from small to large cities, and it works, and it's a shame because it's sort of anti-capitalism. The less they do, the more reward financially. Now here's a house that was a beautiful single-family house, and if you had that house in Greenwich, it would cost millions. And it's falling apart, it burned down, and the same thing happened. In Upper Albany, the houses that are complete in Hartford and built up and kept up, their taxes go down about 9%, and interestingly, the vacant lots go up about 10%. So essentially, and again, I hate to do the numbers. This is where I always put people to sleep, so don't worry, folks, it's almost over. But if we changed Hartford's tax structure, a land value tax, taking that burned out house, if they didn't have a land tax, it would be a 40% tax increase. If there was a partial land tax, it would go up 6%. And that's a benefit.
So we're talking the same amount of tax dollars, but shifting who's paying it away from the people taking care of their houses and onto the people who are often absentee landlords or speculators who are just kind of holding on to these properties without doing anything to improve them.
And what's interesting about a speculator is they can wait, because the tax burden is so low on land, they can wait until kingdom come before they sell. They don't have to even accept a reasonable offer for the land, because they can just sit and wait, and that's the problem. And if the building falls apart, so much the better.
So are Hartford and Norwalk among the communities who are filling out these applications?
Yes, as a matter of fact. And East Hartford is interested, Bridgeport, and Waterbury. We're a very small nonprofit, though, so I have to drive around Connecticut and meet with people. And so we have to have, I guess all the applications have to be in by December 1st. So that's when the state, the Office of Planning and Management, will then choose which communities. I think most communities are going to start with their central business districts, because Waterbury's, for example, is
Right.
flat on its back. It sounds rude to say, but it's the truth. And so, pardon me, we think that'll be how it's going to go down, as they say.
But I'm thinking that the municipalities will have some flexibility in determining how to apply this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They'll be able to choose the geographical size, the type of tax rates, you name it. It's very flexible in that sense, although you do have to, jump through the state hoops, but that's to be expected.
Yeah, but I'm hoping there is not the strict time limit that New London had. I think psychologically one of the problems in New London was that once it was passed, we had to have a plan approved in something like 3 months or 4 months, and people felt very dictated to by the state and not very empowered by the process, which was unfortunate, but it happened.
Yeah, I think there's more a realization that all Connecticut cities, old urban areas, really need to have a lot of choices. And whatever those choices may turn out to be, I don't know, but giving people the option in their community to decide what's right for their own community, I think the state is starting to accept that.
Well, and in the long run, of course, it would help the state. Right now, the state, in some direct ways, subsidizes the cities, even
Sure.
though they also take it away.
True.
So, but I think helping the urban areas be more autonomous would help everyone.
They don't want to have basket cases to support. That doesn't make any sense. Cities don't want to be struggling and asking for help all the time, and the help is pretty much over. We're entering, I think, a new era in the United States. Cities are going to become necessarily more autonomous, and they will have to become very creative with their own destinies. The states aren't going to be able to give money out anymore. The feds don't have any money to give out anymore. I think those days are kind of over, and so you have to invent your own future in your town.
Now, if people want to learn more about this,
Yeah.
what's the best way for them to get more information about it?
Well, the miracle of Google is good. Our website has a lot of Connecticut-specific information, and our website is urbantoolsconsult.org. Thank you very much for putting that on there. And again, we're a nonprofit, and we give out our information, we give out our studies and analysis, and that's the best way to find out. It works in Pennsylvania where it's been tried. And it's been supported by people on the left, people on the right, business people, government people, you name it.
Now, we have about 5 minutes left. So
okay.
I saw, looking at the website, that there's a webinar coming up. Is there a way people can sign up for that? I think it's in a month or so.
Yeah, it's on July 11th, and it's a Pennsylvania-based webinar for the Affordable Housing Coalition of Pennsylvania, and they're sponsoring it. But municipalities from all over the state are going to be phoning in, and if people write to Urban Tools Consult and just ask about the webinar, we'll send the information out. I know that people from as far away as Hawaii and Scotland are signing up for it. The Scottish and the Irish are very interested in the land value tax, interestingly.
Yeah, I'm guessing they have some old cities also that need rehabbing and have similar problems to what we're facing.
Exactly. Yes.
And I know Connecticut Council of Municipalities has over the last many years become very interested.
Yeah.
Is there any, do they need public input, or do they have information to offer if people wanted to get involved in some way?
I think, yeah, the CCM, it does support it and will actually give some help. Also, the 1,000 Friends of Connecticut are supportive. We also had support from the Builders Association, naturally.
Right. I would think all the real estate people would be happy, because you'd have properties changing hands where they were just being sat on.
Realtors, it's funny, in Philadelphia, the realtors really support it because they need to have a market. As you said, you've got to have transactions, and so they think that can do that. The best place to look, though, probably right now is our site, because we're working specifically on Connecticut right now.
And so you're going to spend the day tomorrow driving around.
Absolutely, down the back roads.
Well, I'll be interested in seeing what happens. In the last minute, I just wanted to mention, just as an analogy that I think of about land value tax, is you mentioned SHOOP and city parking. Parking garages, you pay according to where the space is, not according to whether you're driving a Beamer or a Yugo.
Yeah.
And in a way, the land value tax is similar. You're paying because, you have a spot that has a lot of assets, or out in the boonies, you can park for free.
Yeah.
You go to New York City, you know what, you're going to pay a bundle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all, what do they say? Location, location, location. And that's what the land value tax is all about.
And, amazingly, in New London here, we do have a great location. And if we appreciated and looked at our assets, I think we do better economically, but we'd also maybe feel a little more satisfied with what we have.
Community pride. And it's there, and it should be unleashed. I mean, you have, for example, on Bank Street, you have the new condominiums. They're nice, they're well built. They would certainly benefit under a land value tax dramatically.
They would. They had a temporary abatement, but those buyers are going to have sticker shock after 5 years.
They certainly are, and they're going to appeal their assessments.
And hopefully they won't move out.
And I don't think they will move out, but they might rent, who knows. But if we get a land value tax, they'll stick around. I guarantee it.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for coming in during your Connecticut tour.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And if anyone wants more information at urbantools.org or urbantools.consult.org.
Yes.
I think either one will
Either
take
one
you
works,
to
yeah.
the right place.
Yeah.
So, and thanks a lot, and we'll be interested in tracking how this happens in Connecticut.
I'll keep you posted.
And this is actually my last show until October, so next week, Mark Roberts is going to be the host, and he's going to talk about putting solar panels on your house in New London. Mm-hmm. And, so we'll see you next week, and thanks again, Josh.
Thank you very much.